My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Okay, today we have the Nodus Contrail GMT in for review. Now, I loved the non-GMT version of the Contrail, so I was thrilled to have the chance to borrow this GMT version to review on the channel. However, before we get to the review, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you're enjoying the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. For price and availability, this watch comes in 4 colorways and is priced at $825 US. Some of the colorways are currently sold out as of the recording of this video. However, Nodus generally does restock their models, so keep an eye out for that. The case is 40.5 millimeters in diameter, 12 millimeters thick, but that includes about 1 millimeter of boxed sapphire crystal. The lug-to-lug is a short 46.5, but the end links do extend past the case, making that true lug-to-lug closer to 52 millimeters. And then finally, the lug with opening is 20 millimeters. Now sized for my 6 3/4 inch wrist, the watch weighs 139 grams on the bracelet. The case is mostly hidden from the top by the large bezel. However, the mid case has large, flowing, high-polished chambers that extend all the way down the curved lugs. The bottom of mid case is also scalloped away and brought up to a high polish. That high polish continues into the crown guards that extend out of the case to envelop the crown. Now the rest of the mid case is brushed. Nodus really took advantage of how thin this Miyota GMT movement is and kept the case really thin overall. And then despite that true lug to lug being closer to 52 millimeters with those solid end links, this watch wears comfortably and svelte on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. The stock bracelet features a quick release system that has absolutely zero play with the head of the watch. The articulation of the bracelet against the back of the watch and between the links are both excellent, 2 factors that contribute heavily to the overall comfort of a bracelet. Now there's a dramatic taper from 20 millimeters all the way down to 16 before jumping back up to 18 millimeters on the clasp. Now the links are small, and while they're mostly brushed, they will catch quite a bit of light, which adds to the bling factor of this watch overall. Now this newer Nodus clasp is gorgeous. It features a raised brush section with Nodus nicely etched in, and then flanking that section we have high polish. The effect is really lovely and also makes the clasp appear thinner than it is. The twin trigger release reveals a milled clasp and the Node X quick adjust system, which I'm a huge fan of. I only have a single complaint that on the Node X, at maximum extension, there will be a very small gap between the links of the watch and the clasp, but this is something you're never really going to notice on wrist. And then finally, sizing is accomplished with screw links, making sizing a snap. The screw down caseback still has a jet with contrails, much like the earlier versions of this watch, and it just looks really excellent. And then this watch also features a whopping 200 meters of water resistance. The 6 millimeter screw down crown is heavily knurled and signed with the Nodus logo, but it's just a little hard to access sometimes between those crown guards. I had the same issue on the non-GMT Contrail, and I wish they had sized up the crown a touch or shaved back the crown guards a bit. I love the look of the crown, but I just wish it was ever so slightly easier to use. The boxed sapphire crystal on this watch looks excellent. I just love how boxed sapphires look generally, and because this watch is so thin, that extra height is a non-factor. We also get an anti-reflective coating on the underside of this crystal. Now this watch features the new Miyota GMT, the 9075. This is a hacking, hand-winding 28,800 vibration per hour movement with a 42-hour power reserve. The stated accuracy is -10 to +30 seconds a day, but it's regulated by Nodus in this watch to plus or minus 8 seconds a day. Now this is a really nice GMT movement with a super snappy action when you jump the hour hand. With the GMT hand set to your home time, you can quickly adjust your local time using that function. The only downside to this quote-unquote true GMT is that you don't have a quick set date, so to set the date you'll have to use that hour hand jumping feature to change the date on this watch. Now there's a lot to talk about with this bezel. First, look at this intense knurling. Now I love the look of it, but as you can see, it really does catch a lot of light, which I'll get into more in the pros and cons section. Now this is a bi-directional bezel with 48 positions, which is the perfect setup for a GMT, allowing you to track 3 time zones, or simply turn the bezel for that second time zone. The insert is sapphire glass and a gorgeous blue and white, with the white section being fully lumed. The numerals are super crisp and easy to read, and then the bezel is quite easy to turn thanks to that really chunky edge. Let's talk about this dial. First, we have a steep chapter ring that has the odd GMT numerals to complement the evens on the bezel. The color of the chapter ring is a nice blue that matches the dial very well. At the very edge of the dial, we have a darker section with dashes for the minutes. However, they're very hard to make out and don't add that much utility. Moving in, we have a beautiful blue dial with a sunburst effect. Now, this dial is going to range in color from appearing almost black to some very intense shades of blue depending on the lighting. The applied indices are filled with lume and edged in high polish. That high polish border actually terminates at the intersection where the lume then sort of angles out onto the dial. It's a really cool effect and quite subtle. We then have a double index at 12 and a nicely framed date window at 6, and the shape of that date window matches the shape of the 12 o'clock double index, which is really nice and retains the dial symmetry. Of course, this is Nodus, so we have a color matched date wheel, but they also went a step further and made it roulette style, where half of the days are printed in white and half in yellow, which is really fun. Finally, we have Nodus at 12, Contrail and GMT at 6. The dial is perfectly balanced, symmetrical, and has just the right amount of text. Now, I'm a huge fan of this handset. I want to take special note that the second hand here is capped. It's such a small detail, but even watches that are 4 to 5 times the price of this one, you can see the point where the second hand attaches to the pinion. And then this cap second hand, I think just looks so much cleaner. And I love that Nodus is starting to do this on their watches. The second hand also has a loomed counterbalance. The hour and minute hands are these clipped sword style hands with brushing along the top and high polish angled sides. They're also filled with lume. They're going to catch light in fantastic ways and are very legible. Finally, we have that yellow GMT hand that also has a clipped arrow at the tip. That arrow is also loomed. This handset looks excellent against the blue, and you're not going to confuse the GMT hand with any of the other hands on this handset, which is sometimes a problem on GMT watches. Now, this is Nodus, so you know the lume is going to be epic, and this watch is extra special with that fully loomed bottom half of the bezel. And then this lume, of course, is bright, responsive, and long-lasting. And here's the watch on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Despite those extending end lengths making the true lug-to-lug 52 millimeters, I think it still wears great on my wrist size. And then as you can see from the side, it wears quite thin. Notice taking advantage of that thin Miyota movement here. As for pros and cons, starting with the pros, well, I'm a huge fan of Nodus. There's so much attention to detail. I love how they regulate the movements. I love that they use the Miyota 9075 here. You know, they had the other GMT watch where they used the Seiko GMT, and I was really excited to see what they were going to use with the Miyota. And I think this is the Nodus GMT watch. It really has that Nodus DNA down to its core. The fact that they used the Contrail as the platform, I think it was the perfect watch to give the full GMT movement. You know, I previously had one with the 12-hour bezel, so you could easily use the bezel as kind of the second time zone, but now it has the full movement, and they went with a Miyota, which I think is going to be a tried and true movement. Obviously, it's quite new, so we'll have to see, you know, if there's any issues with them down the line. The details of the watch are gorgeous. The handset, the dial, the bezel, they're all extremely well done. I'm a huge fan of sapphire inserts on bezels, and this one's no exception. And then in this colorway, it's fully loomed, which is just awesome. As for cons, I actually preferred the old Contrail bracelet. It was a bit rounder and I found it a bit more comfortable overall. Obviously, it didn't have the nicer clasp and the quick adjust, but I just really liked the links on the older bracelet. And then second, this is something I've noticed on a lot of brands. The corners of the clasp can be a bit, I don't want to say sharp, but they could be rounded down a bit. And then third, the crown, it's just a little too small. I'd love to see it be slightly bigger, or if that couldn't be accomplished, maybe dial back the crown guards a little bit. And then this is very neutral, but just something you're going to want to keep in mind. This watch wears very blingy between the bracelet and the applied indices, and especially the way the bezel catches light. This is going to be a pretty flashy watch, so just keep that in mind if you're thinking about picking one of these up. As for comps, you could check out the Jack Mason Strato Timer GMT. I really want to borrow one to review on the channel, but that also uses the Miyota 9075. And then there's also the Boulder has an Odyssey Freediver GMT that uses the Miyota, and I think those are both about the same price as this watch and probably comparables to this watch. Obviously very different styles, but definitely things to consider. If you're looking for a cheaper option, I just continue to fall back to the Seiko 5 GMT. Now obviously that uses the Seiko movement and it's a slightly different style of GMT, but they are releasing it in so many colorways, and it's such a great entry point and affordable way to get a mechanical GMT watch. watch. So there you have it, the Nodus Contrail GMT. What do you think about this watch? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you like the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason, and you have been watching Just Watches.